Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider. They came out of the mountains to ravage and rape a small mining village. Suddenly, a stranger appeared, and hell followed with him. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider, rated R. Opens Friday, June 28th at a theater near you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome. We are from the Q Podcasting Network. My co-host, as always, is Brian. Please leave a 4 or 5-star review on Spotify or Apple to get those algorithms going. Please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. We would like for you to click the bell icon so that people can get notifications. We are continuing our look at 1985. This week we are discussing, of course, Pale Rider. We have never talked about a Clint Eastwood movie, Brian. I feel like we're playing with fire. Clint Eastwood is 95 years old. He has gone into pre-production on another movie, and it's pretty wild to think about. We were just discussing before we were recording that he did 7 seasons of a TV show, for God's sake. So Clint Eastwood, one of the most prolific actors, directors of his time. Also, somewhat of a problematic figure, as you might imagine. Just look up, just Google search Clint Eastwood on Sandra Locke for more information on that. But we are going to be discussing the 40th anniversary of the movie Pale Rider, which in so many ways is a precursor to Unforgiven and a payoff to so many of the other Westerns that he had done previously. Brian, this is a movie that is Clint Eastwood, and a lot of people I feel like you would more recognize from TV than movies, but this is very much a classic Western. And I think it's, I think the Western has a reputation for sort of following these formulas, these very typical types of stories. Either a stranger coming into town, someone needs to be rescued and caught, or the usual shenanigans that happen in a small Western town. But the one thing I can say, Brian, is what elevates this one above some of the others, and one of the reasons that I really like it is Clint Eastwood really knows how to direct a Western, not just in getting the vistas, but getting to the heart of the matter and really creating an emotion that you don't see in every Western. And I think that's why I like this compared to a lot of the John Ford, John Wayne collaborations. And admittedly, I've not seen very many of them. But I'm not a huge fan of John Wayne's style of acting. I think Clint Eastwood, Clint Eastwood has very limited range. But I just think as a director, he is able to control what he does. And I think he is, again, able to bring in that little something extra to make these movies feel beyond just, oh, this is a Western, but make them feel special.
Yeah, he's definitely got the director's eye, and you can tell like he picked up a lot from like a Sergio Leone in terms of framing a shot. And it's one of these little things that we don't really get in movies anymore, where it's like you just put the camera down, you're at a train station, and the train just comes into the foreground from into the perspective shot. Like it's one of those old things that they do in movies that you really don't get anymore, man. And I just love seeing a train station shot, especially in a Western when the train just comes in, man. And you get that beautiful shot, and there's so many beautiful exterior shots. They filmed this, I think in Idaho or something like that. Like they built the whole town, and it looked beautiful because all the wide shots are just like, sun down, sun up, the beautiful colors with the sun coming through. And that's the only time when you get like good colors in this movie. Like he kind of muted and watered down the colors like on purpose to kind of give it that darker, gritty kind of feel because this is like a mining town that this is the story's about. And this mining town, of course, is anytime there's a mining town, there's always that corporation or company that's trying to come in and swoop in and take the mining, prospects from the miners and stuff, no matter how they get it. And that's the story of this until, the Pale Rider comes to town, Clint Eastwood, and takes out the bad guys. That's pretty much the plot of this movie, but it's very like subtle the way he comes into town and he's very quiet. That's kind of the way that his characters are in these movies, these westerns. The quiet guy that comes to town and then kind of studies what's going on around in the town and kind of figures everyone out. Usually when it comes to like the beginning of a Clint Eastwood movie in a Western, what I usually start doing is like, okay, how many bad guys are there? And I start counting, and then I start counting and realize, okay, we're gonna get six motherfuckers about to be shot at the end of this movie, like really like quick, and that's exactly what happens in this movie. He shoots like six dudes really quick, and yeah, there's some really funny scenes in this movie, like visually, like I don't think they're supposed to be purposely funny, but the way that they're shot just makes some of these like Western tropes kind of look like on their like kind of turn them on their ear. The way that Clint Eastwood is just sneaking around town shooting all these bad guys at the end of the movie, it's very like meticulous and very like purposeful the way he directs those shots. So he really gets it down. I think the filler stuff in the middle is kind of where he's kind of like stretching things too much. I think that has more to do with the writing of the movie. I think this is like a B level script, not like a B movie, but like it definitely needed like some rewrites for sure. And I would have eliminated some of the plot elements, aka the borderline pedophilia, I guess, with 15-year-olds trying to get married in the Old West, but that's the one thing about this movie, Jerome, that just gets me every time. It's like they had to go with that Leon the professional route where they just had to tease this underage illegal romance that they shouldn't even like they should not be teasing that in the first place. So yeah, that's this movie's an hour and 55
I
minutes, so
mean,
I'll give it
it could
credit
have
for
been
that.
worse.
I mean, they could have
Like
cut that sequence out, that whole subplot,
I think in
and I think it would have been
1985,
fine.
I think it's just acceptable. I am not excusing it, but it's funny to me is that Roger Ebert cited that as kind of a positive of the movie and something that elevates it. I'm not sure that I agree with it, but again, watching it through 2025 eyes, I think it's just more problematic than it would have been in 1985. Like the fact that an underage romance doesn't happen is a credit to the movie. I don't know, man. I think it's just something we have to really just reconcile with the fact that there is this perception of girls being underage and it being okay for older men to date them, marry them, what have you. And I don't know. I think we really need to have that conversation and make sure it stops happening. And in the entertainment industry, especially, it is a huge problem. I think in terms of some of the other elements of this movie that I think work, I think you have a solid TV supporting cast. I mean, to me, I always associate Michael Moriarty as the original DA on Law and Order. Richard Dicehart from LA Law. I do think it's funny that in the end, the guy from Law and Order kills the guy from LA Law. Perhaps a little symbolic. Clint Eastwood didn't realize how symbolic he was, but think of how relevant Law and Order is to the culture and how irrelevant LA Law is. So I want to point that out. I think there's some again good performances. I don't think that Clint Eastwood always gets the credit that he deserves for directing really good female performances. I think specifically Hilary Swank obviously won one of her Academy Awards for Million Dollar Baby. That's probably the most notable. But even if you watch this movie, I think you get two really strong performances from the two lead female performers, and I think there is something to that, and that's something that again you don't necessarily get in every western. You don't get Carrie Snodgrass and Sydney Penny kind of getting to be full characters. And again, you mentioned the problematic nature of the scene with Megan and with the preacher, and I have no doubt. But the nice thing is that Megan Wheeler, Sarah Wheeler, they feel like characters. They don't feel like they're just damsels in distress, even though there is an element of that. But that's the thing that I really appreciate is that in a lot of westerns, I mean, you're lucky if there's one female character, and if they get any sort of development or agency. And it's certainly it is by no means perfect, but I think when you're grading on a scale, I think Sarah and Megan get a lot more to do than a lot of other female characters do, typically in westerns.
That's for sure. I agree with that. That's definitely for sure. If you watch the Sergio Leone trilogy, like there's very much that heavy male dominant character influence. All the female characters are just there to be like, the supportive cogs in the wheel of the script, basically. Um, but I think this script has like a lot of like holes in it though. Like I feel like they left some unfinished things on the table, like things were unclear. Like we got a good performance by Chris Penn, but I feel like they could have got a lot more out of him. I don't know if they knew at the time that he had that kind of like performance in him because we know that later on he would have some really eccentric
It
performances.
feels like it needed his performance needed to be bigger, and I don't know if I'm saying that just because I've seen him be bigger in other movies, but it just feels like you really like you can see why Gene Hackman was brought in to Unforgiven. I think you really need somebody that can play off of Clint Eastwood and go bigger because I think Richard Dysart is trying to do that, and I think he only gets about 75% of the way there. Again, I think his performance is solid, but again, there's a reason that you bring in Gene Hackman for Unforgiven because the energy that Clint Eastwood pulls out, you need something really strong. Because Clint Eastwood, it's not that his performance is great, it's that he is extremely charismatic. He's extremely good at carrying himself on camera. And the thing that I always say to represent that is the looks that he gives and that walk, Brian. You know what I'm talking about, the walk.
He does that walk in every single one of his Westerns, man.
And it is
Uh,
fantastic.
it's great.
Like
He
he nails it
communicates with his
every
body
single
language. Yeah.
time. Like
Communicating with
that's the
body
thing.
language is key, and I think that he's so good in these movies when he does that that there's moments of silence that you can use because of it that leads to like some dramatic moments and tension when you got close up of other people's eyeballs on him and then his eyeballs on the other people. Like there's that sense of tension that Westerns can give you because of that, and I think that's because of the performance and Will and Clint Eastwood I think just really like is so good at it that he's mastered it at this point, and this is like his 13th Western at this point in his career. And I think Unforgiven will be his last one. So this is like his second to last Western. So he's pretty much nailed it down. And this idea of the preacher role, I guess this is where you talk about the ghost idea. Like this is, I agree. Like this is probably him as a ghost or something, but not because it's
I mean, the
like,
premise of the movie is that Megan Wheeler's dog dies, so there's that John Wick element to it. She prays for a miracle, and the preacher appears, and the preacher doesn't really like you would not know that he's a preacher except for the collar, but throughout the movie, he definitely can be seen, not seen, appears, disappears, comes out of nowhere. I mean, there's definitely that supernatural element that I think could definitely exist. Like if you like, I don't necessarily think it either hurts or helps the movie that he is a ghost, but it is certainly an interesting idea. And again, I think Clint Eastwood as the preacher character plays it off really
right. And I think the most badass scene in the movie is just him taking off the collar, putting it down, and then picking up the guns. I thought that was just like so good in terms of a
well. I mean,
visual.
the build
Like,
up to him picking up the guns that is electric stuff because like everybody in the world knows that he's going to do it, but you build up to it. And then when Megan, and again, it's not, again, in 1985, it's more acceptable. I mean, Megan Wheeler is basically about to get assaulted. And then you hear the first gunshot emanating from Clint Eastwood's gun. And it's very loud. And it's like, oh shit, like this is the moment right here.
yeah, and then that's where he just starts like killing everybody, like everybody. But yeah, it's just one of those great moments in the movie, visually, in terms of like relating to a moment. Like, oh shit, he's giving up like the cloth for a second just to get some revenge. But this idea of him being a ghost, like it ties back to another movie he did called High Plains Drifter. And in that one, a lot of people just kind of agree that that's more of like supernatural, like it goes deeper into the supernatural stuff and just this idea of a guy coming into town, getting revenge on the people that killed him. Similar kind of themes, right? But it's almost as if that the spirit of that character is kind of like in a pseudo sequel in this movie. And I guess that's what a lot of people kind of have that vibe, which is what I kind of feel too. It has that same kind of like feel of like him coming to town, like at the moment of crisis, and then coming in right when they need him and just saving the day. There's another movie like that too called Shane. That's not a Clint Eastwood movie, but that's a really good movie as well. I recommend checking that one out. I think that's like 1954, but it has a strong influence on like Inglourious Basterds and the way it was shot as well. So of course, Tarantino ripping off westerns. Who do you thunk it? But there's so like this idea of the stranger coming into town, like that's been played like as a trope in so many westerns. But the way that kind of Clint Eastwood pulls it off is like this
Oh,
ghost
absolutely.
thing, and it's not like just in this movie, like I said in High Plains Drifter. I mean, he literally paints the town red in that one, and like that movie, it's just like he just does not give a fuck, and it's like, who is this guy? Because at the beginning of that movie, you see a completely different guy getting murdered, and so the implication is that he's kind of reborn into this new physical being, almost like The Crow, but to a different extent. And this is what the kind of vibe you get here, but more of the religious kind of feeling to it. So I guess there's these more religious kind of themes to this movie that are kind of like subversive. And in terms of like the spiritualness of the movie and like a preacher coming to town and saving the day. But there's also some other really good stuff too about like, I think we talked about this before when talking about like uh uh not De what Deadwood. The similar thing with Deadwood where it's like this idea of individuals getting bought out or like being like brushed out by like the big corporations coming into these towns and trying to take over these mining towns, and whether or not you should sell out or not, and when to sell. And it was like, oh, these are very like deep conversations about like wealth and stuff that kind of hit today when in terms of like finances, in terms of like investing your money kind of thing. So I was kind of having those flashes of like, wow, this is kind of like a more similar, relevant conversation today than I thought when they're all the group of people were coming together like, should we sell $1,000 each mine? Like, should we do it? Should we do it? And they're like, the only reason they're giving you $1,000 is because they know it's worth 5 times as much. And they proved that right in this movie. So I thought that was a really interesting thing about sticking to your guns and your investment and like not selling at a certain point and selling at the right point kind of thing. So I thought that was a really good like little, tale of like finance in this movie about knowing when to sell and being pressured when to sell.
I mean, I've always been of the opinion that Unforgiven and Deadwood kind of serve as the ultimate one-two punch. Like these are the last two westerns that ever need to be made, and look, there's certainly been decent ones since Deadwood, but it just doesn't feel like a genre that really has a whole lot else to say, um, unless you're doing it from the perspective of indigenous people. Like that's the only way that I think you have anything new to say about it in terms of this genre. And specifically, I think with Clint Eastwood, like I think there's a reason that he only does this movie. This is his only western of the '80s, and he only does one more after. I think there's a reason for that, and I think it's because the genre has been overexplored at this point, and I don't think there really is a lot else to say. And again, we still do get westerns, but I just don't think I don't think Horizon that came out last year. I don't think that really adds a lot to the canon. But I think that even a movie like this is very familiar. I think this movie is extremely well done, and I think the way that Clint Eastwood builds and builds and builds and has these different payoffs. He establishes the preacher as this badass, even when he doesn't have a gun. Like when he has the hickory, kind of looks like a baseball bat, and he just beats the hell out of those guys. And then says something about like there's nothing like a good piece of hickory. Like I mean, he's got some very very strong one-liners. I do appreciate that in 1985 that the preacher has to fight a giant.
And it's the giant from Happy Gilmore, which is kind of a tie-in in 2 weeks from now, Jerome. But we'll get to that a little later.
I
But
mean,
it's the
it's
same
Jaws.
giant.
It's Jaws.
I mean, I don't want to just call him Jaws. I forget his name off the bat, but
Richard Keel.
Richard Keel, like he's more than Jaws to me. You know what I'm saying? And we're not talking about Bruce the Shark. We're talking about Jaws, the henchman from Bond that came
Two
back for
Bond. He
two
was the
cons
he's the only henchman in two different Bond.
yeah, and as the same character, they just hired him out different like
Yes.
regimes or something. But he's so good at this because it looks like he's about to just smash Clint Eastwood, and that at the time they're holding sledgehammers, and it's like, uh oh, here comes a Triple H moment, and something Triple H I don't think has even done is fucking smash. He smashes Jaws in the nuts with a sledgehammer, and then walks him to the back to his horse and like, feel better now. And I thought that was the most like badass thing. Like you just took down this giant and then helped him back to his horse and then told him to have a good day and feel better. And I was just like, dude, that
And then
was
he is
incredible.
basically never seen for the. I mean, I know he is seen through the movie, but he's
Okay,
like,
that's
I'm not.
another issue I want to bring up. So like him and Chris Penn, I'm assuming they died in the explosions at the mine, but they just didn't show it. We know Chris Penn gets shot in the hand, and he's the son of the guy who's the main guy running the
Yeah.
corporation or whatever. But are we just to assume that he like dies in the explosions? Because we never see that, and I'm just kind of like wondering, like, man, that's a lot of left on the table because he could have had some good like final moment scenes because we know Chris Penn has that kind of like acting chops in him. But again, I mentioned this because it's 1985. We only know him as like the guy from Footloose, right? So I don't know if they wanted to give him that many lines to give because I thought like him explaining the whole setup was really like good and that kind of like we got to explain the evil nature of our corporation kind of trope. But I thought he had a lot to offer on the table, man, and it's just unfortunate that they just kind of left him off the third act.
I mean, it is truly the ultimate story of America in that it's really all about real estate. Like at the end of the day, it is all about real estate.
True that. And then I think the one strong scene that we got to mention too is that one dude that finds the giant gold nugget and then just and the most stupid thing you can possibly do is get drunk in the middle of the street, call out your mortal enemy, and then have him send out his seven fucking shooter hired guns to like, I guess they wanted to like what antagonize him so much that he pulled out his own gun, and that's the only way you can get him to shoot, which they did. And I was like, dude, don't do it,
I mean,
do
you do
not
that because
do
you
it.
want to
And he did
establish
it, and he got
how.
shot.
I mean,
It
you
was
are establishing the fact that law enforcement is all about protecting land and corporations over people, which is really crazy to think about given Clint Eastwood's own political views, but that's what the movie is telling you. The movie is telling you that the cop is there to preserve corporations, which
Yeah,
is pretty crazy.
it's a crazy scene to watch because the guy's like freaking out, thinking that he's fine because he's not doing anything wrong that would be worthy of him getting shot. And then all of a sudden they start shooting at his legs and he just feels the pressure and just pulls his own gun out of like out of I guess self-defense in his own mind, but then he just of course in the light of law, it's like you just pulled out a gun on someone so you can be clearly shot at and that's legal and he gets shot at like by seven people. And not only that, when he's already dead, the guy shoots him in the head. And I thought that was the most insulting thing, which is why Clint Eastwood shoots him in the head at the end of the movie, already knowing that the guy's dead. So I thought that was a little like, you shoot this guy in the head, I'm gonna shoot you in the head. So I thought that was a little like getting even moment. But I did think that was kind of interesting that when the gold nugget breaks, it breaks in two. And I thought, wow, that's symbolic because he's got these two sons now. They're just going to split it equally, and that's the story that he's going to just die and give this gold piece split into two to his two sons, and that's it.
Absolutely. So this the movie's title is directly taken from the Bible, the Book of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 8. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, which is pretty. It's not subtle, I'll say that much. And while we don't get ultimate resolution of whether the Pale Rider is a ghost, it is something that Clint Eastwood has stated that he is as such. And I also want to point out another reason that this movie was kind of Clint Eastwood, perhaps his only Western of the 80s. This was the first mainstream Hollywood Western to be produced after the massive financial failure that was Heaven's Gate.
Oh my God, Michael Cimino, right? That was like how
I
many
mean,
millions of
it is
dollars? Like 30
infamous.
million,
A
something like that.
$44 million budget, and it made $3.5 million. It
And
is
I know more of this recently because I was on that binge of uh Siskel and Ebert episodes, and when they bring this up, I think they reviewed it twice because they re-released it like a
crazy.
couple weeks later to try to like recoup the funds to try to like people go
I think
watch
they
it on the
tried to
shorter
like
version.
I think they tried to like shorten it, and
Even
then
that version was like even crap. What they said,
just
it's
didn't
like
work.
you can't
Just
fix it no matter how long it is because of the way it was shot or something like that because it was shot poorly. So there you go.
a complete disaster. I mean, just really the ending of the '70s auteur filmmaking in so many ways, but just a complete disaster.
And there's not
It
many
was
like 80s westerns that I can think of other than Silverado, Young Guns. What am I missing here? I think that's it. And Pale Rider. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
It feels like those are like the only
you don't really get
ones.
a lot. That's for sure. I mean, this is definitely the Western was fading in relevance, and I think that Unforgiven was very much the end of it. Like the Unforgiven is probably the last truly great Western that we've seen. And again, there have been other ones that I've certainly enjoyed. We've
I would
talked
say
about The Quick and
310
the
to Yuma is
Dead.
a fun movie that's not
I
a
mean,
lot
it's very
to
good, but I
say.
don't.
It doesn't have a lot to say, but it's a
It
great
doesn't add a
directed
lot.
movie. Yeah.
It doesn't add a lot to the proceedings. And as we speak, there's we've had we're thinking whether Horizon 2 is going to come out. There's one I think with Pierce
Well, I think
Brosnan
that's
and
going to come
Samuel
out no matter
Jackson.
what on streaming. It's just the third and fourth one will
Well,
they ever
there's a
get
lawsuit
filmed?
of an alleged sexual assault, so who knows?
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Um, yeah, I watched Horizon, folks, last year. I was the only one in the theater. It was a late night showing, but yeah, it's not a good sign. It wasn't a good sign then. And for the budget that that movie had and the amount of movie that or the amount of money that it grossed, it's just Kevin Costner does not know what he's doing. Sometimes I think sometimes he just goes off and does something else, man,
I
and
mean,
that's
he
what he's
is,
doing.
speaking of bombs, I mean, it's certainly something that we know he is very infamous at, just like with Heaven's Gate. But Clint Eastwood, not known for making bombs. I mean, as a director, he very much has a reputation of keep being, let's say, business hours, doing 1 to 2 takes, be done by 6 p.m. And I think that's one of the reasons that people loved working with him so much is this idea of, okay, we're going to do 1 to 2 takes and then we're gonna call it a day. We're gonna be done. And I think it is borne fruit from his career. I mean, he is an actor's director, and he seems to be very friendly to actors. I mean, everybody talks about in terms of his professional as a director. I've seen very few complaints.
Yeah, and his reputation as a director seems to be that he gets the best performances from his actors. I think that him and well, I'm just maybe just him for now I could think of, but like it's something about him being a past
I mean,
actor.
Gene Hackman won an Academy Award.
Yeah, it's like he's so good at like just letting the players play, so to speak, right? And
Absolutely.
and then he also knows how to shoot great like scenery. So when you combine those two things, that's like two strengths that a lot of directors don't even have. So when you can rely on those strengths, like you can pull out some really great stuff. And I think that even a movie like Million Dollar Baby, where it's like I don't think that's the greatest movie in the world, but it held my attention for 2 hours, and it's very memorable for the performances. It's like okay, that's what it
It's
is.
very
Same thing with
memorable
like Gran
because of
Torino.
the dramatic almost ending that happens.
Right. And another, Gran Torino I like, but that's again like he just had great performances from like a young cast
Not a
that had
movie
like
that you
no
see a lot in
experience.
repeats these days because of some of the language issues, which
Right, right. But
definitely not
that's definitely
ideal.
a movie where it's like on budget. There's not a lot of money on the table. It's just like let's get a bunch of young actors to pair off with Clint, and then he just went at it, and the young actors ended up giving some really good performances in that movie. So I can easily see why that a lot of actors go to Clint Eastwood and be like, okay, I'm going to do some real acting today because he's going to give me the leeway to do so. He's not going to be obsessive about it like a Stanley Kubrick, but that's just different personalities. And you're going to get different works. So, and then not everything that Clint Eastwood does lands, right? I mean, look at like Space Cowboys, or right, or um, Bird. I think a lot of people just kind of forget about Bird, right?
I mean,
There's a lot
he's
of stuff.
he's had some movies that definitely haven't been successful, and I think
Although
that's
I'd
acceptable.
probably play Misty for me. I got to watch that. I watched it a long, long time ago, but I remember that being like suspiciously like, wow, this is Clint Eastwood.
I mean, it's
Um,
kind of what makes his career so amazing is that he really started directing early, like in 1971, the same year that Dirty Harry came out. That's the year that he also directed his first movie. And I mean, look, the fact is that I look at his career and I think if he is not directing a movie, it's probably not as great. And certainly there are exceptions to that. Again, Dirty Harry being one of them. But I always associate both his best movies and performances as the ones that he was a director.
for sure. And I think one day we got to tackle the Sergio Leone trilogy. I've kind of mentioned that before we started recording, but yeah, I think that's gonna kind of open your eyes to see how he like kind of got a lot of his skill from Sergio Leone in terms of like set up the camera, all that kind of thing. Because I think Sergio Leone, man, is really like a true teacher. Him and Don Siegel, I guess, is another director that he kind of looked up to.
I
And
could see
yeah,
it.
yeah. And so there's like these Western directors that influenced them, really helped him out. And I think that really like he took it to heart. And the fact that he goes under budget, not under budget, but at budget, and doesn't, we never hear any like stories about overblown productions with Clint Eastwood. It's usually like Francis Ford Coppola or someone like that is just too over the
I
top.
cannot think of a single Clint Eastwood movie that has that has gone in that direction over budget, a lot of controversy.
Like nightmare stories on set, we never hear any of that. It's like he's
Like
always
it's pretty
professional.
amazing. I mean, and again, Clint Eastwood is not perfect. Like he's certainly like the way he treated his ex-wife, the chair incident, and the 2012 RNC. Like these are definitely black marks against him. But in terms of him as a director, like you just don't hear, you just don't hear. I mean, even the way that they talked about him when Juror Number Two came out, the way that Tony Collette and um, the other actor whose name is escaping me, the way they talked about him, like there's a lot of reverence there.
For sure. And like, I guess that kind of wraps up our discussion. My rating is a 7 out of 10, only because I have issues with the script and kind of how like Chris Penn just kind of disappeared at the end of the
Nicholas
movie. So
Holt, that's the name I was looking for. Nicholas Holt. I am at an 8 out of 10. I think this movie is really well done. I don't think it is a top tier western for so many reasons, but I think what it sets out to do, I think it sets out and does it just extremely well. And that's really all you could ask for from a movie like this. Um, yeah, I just maybe at some point we need to do a Clint Eastwood run. We'll see. But next week we are going to finish our 1985 conversation, Brian. Oh boy, we are going to be discussing the winner of the Best Picture award for 1985, a movie that does not get talked about very often. We will probably have our own conversation and our own inclination as to why. We are going to be talking about Out of Africa next week.
yeah, Meryl Streep, Robert Redford, takes place in
The
Africa.
pedigree is unbelievable for this movie.
It takes place in a really like romantic setting, I guess, even though it's Africa.
You
It's
could
like this
say that.
there's a romantic thing going on, folks. I saw this in ninth grade, but there's also this colonial message thing going on, folks. But the problem is your main cast is white, so how do you deliver that message properly? So it's like, yeah, that's the main issue. Like it's very well done. I don't know if it deserved the awards that it got, but I will say this: the I forget his name, but there's that Swedish actor guy. He was like a Bond villain. He's in this movie and he's really good. I think he might have stole the show, as I recall. And I remember Robert Redford like kind of just being there, and Meryl Streep just having that weird accent. So we'll see how that all plays out again.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I am so fascinated to talk about this movie because again, this is one. It is a Best Picture winner that just doesn't get talked about very often at all. So I'm very curious to see just to see what this movie is like. I mean, I know I'm walking in with a certain set of expectations, and we'll see what happens. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to be starting a whole new theme. It will be Brian's turn for the month of July, and it's going to be a very interesting month in its own right. We will discuss that more next week. For Brian, I am Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.